So welcome back. Um, Thank you again to our Flavor Discovery Experience sponsors, Catalonia World Region of Gastronomy 2025, Culinary Sciences, Inc., Dole Packaged Foods, and Climate. And so I want to remind you going forward to follow along with recipes in the app. And for this session, we will take Q&A, we'll take audience questions through Slido. So again, that's in the app on that main page. You can just click into Slido and then add the Wolf 2025, and then you can add your questions. If you're working on a laptop or something and you want to go to slido.com and then just add that Wolf 2025. So now it is my pleasure to introduce General Session 2, Eat the World, from Mediterranean Gastronomy to American Menus. And so it's always a Wolf Wednesday night, day one tradition to bring together some of our panelists to be able to have a conversation. So I am pleased to introduce Frances Kim, who will serve as our moderator. She is digital director for Saveur. Many of you may remember Saveur has been around for a long time and then went away. She'll tell a little bit about it, but a beloved, beautiful magazine. And I personally am just thrilled it's back. And so Saveur, an independently owned media company and biannual magazine specializing in international foodways. It's a perfect partnership for us here at Worlds of Flavor. She previously worked as senior editor and digital programming manager at Food Network and a food editor at Martha Stewart Living. And she feels lucky that thinking about food all day has always been part of her job description. So I'm going to pass it over to Frances. We'll have a panel discussion, and again, as you're thinking about your questions, go to slido.com or on your app, and you can add them in here. And then later on in the conversation, I'll sort of pop in asking your questions on behalf of you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm Frances Kim. I'm the digital director at Saveur Magazine. We're an editor-owned food and travel magazine specializing in international foodways. We recently relaunched our print magazine, which now comes out twice a year. And we have the same mission that we had when we started in 1994, which is to eat the world and experience the world food first, which goes very nicely with the title of this panel. And we've also done a couple Mediterranean Mediterranean stories in recent issues. We did a great cover story on the the brandy taverns of Greece. Did a travel guide of all the must-eat dishes in Istanbul. So lots of great Mediterranean stories there and more to come. But without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. We're joined by Fabrizio Lanza, the executive director of Anna Tosca Lanza Cooking School in Sicily. We have Melek Erdal, a Turkish-Kurdish food writer based in London. We have Nader Meravari. He's at the very end. I'm sorry, I skipped over George. George McLeod, the co-founder and chef behind Sane in Lisbon, Portugal. And Nader Meravari, a Persian food scholar based in Davis, California, right near here in Napa. So when we were thinking about this panel, we wanted to start with the perception of Mediterranean cuisine in the US. As an editor, I have to make some sacrifices to the SEO gods, so I started by looking at the top Google searches for what the perception of Mediterranean cuisine is today. I skipped the AI interpretation because I don't care what the robot thinks of Mediterranean cuisine. But I don't think you'll be surprised that a lot of the top terms were about the Mediterranean diet, which, despite coming of age in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, is still very prevalent in the US today. So really coming at it from a diet and health standpoint rather than the vast regional foodways that are behind Mediterranean cuisine. There are 22 countries, yet often in the US it's much more pigeonholed and thought about as Greek or Turkish, or not kind of considering the breadth and depth of all the countries involved. In terms of ingredients, very plant-based foods, the beautiful sun-dappled produce, the olive oil, the yogurt, all those things, but we're here to talk about so much more than that today. But would love to start as our first question with our panelists. How would you describe your approach in the kitchen, and how closely or not do you feel that it matches this model of what Mediterranean gastronomy is perceived to be here in the US?
So many Americans, this topic American is on the title of this session. Many Americans, when they think about Mediterranean cuisine, it comes to their mind as the beautiful shores of the sea, the olive groves, the lemons, and those type of things. But the eastern boundary of Mediterranean historically goes back all the way to ancient Persia. And Persia act as the bridge between China, Indian, and Iranian plateau, that many of the spices and practices that today some of us believe are Mediterranean came from that part of the world. So when I'm in the kitchen preparing some of the traditional Persian dishes, sometimes they just feel like things that people around the Mediterranean Sea are cooking and sharing. So that's what I feel when I'm in my kitchen at home.
I mean, the way that I work in my restaurant, we're like a zero waste restaurant, so we do a lot of preservation and a lot of working very closely with our farmers and our suppliers, and it's all regenerative agriculture. And but essentially, it's the same as what a lot of the traditional Mediterranean food is. There's a lot of preservation of like capturing things in the peak of the season, saving it for another season, and then matching that with what is in season at the moment. You know, so it's a lot of cross-seasonal food, but like essentially like most of the Mediterranean dishes that we know, the most famous ones, are all kind of based on preservation and like the peak of seasons. So that's basically how I work. It's definitely not Mediterranean food. It's the Mediterranean mindset for sure. What we do is pretty crazy, but it's definitely the same idea. You know, like not wasting anything, kind of holding on to as much as possible, and using just the best and the freshest ingredients. You know, that's kind of the essence of it.
I love that answer. Sorry. I don't know. It's interesting. As someone who's a Kurdish immigrant living in London, it's difficult to think. I've never really thought of myself as someone who cooks Mediterranean food, but because I'm from Turkey, growing up in Istanbul, and it's Turkey is an interesting place where it's the cusp of it's partly it's absorbing Mediterranean, and then it's part of Asia as well. And I think Kurds are such nomads that they absorb and give to where they are. You know, food moves. And so for me, the way I think of food like a language. It's been the way I've stayed connected to my culture and roots. It's the language that I kind of stay connected, basically. And so I like to cook things that have context and a story. And I like to, and I never follow a recipe. So, and because, if you try to ask any of my elders for a recipe, for one, they would scold you and think that's outrageous. They never write recipes down. Things are passed down orally. And I think the wisdom in that is that it encourages you to cook with your family, and you learn as you cook. And so the way I think there's no, the way I like to cook, I don't want to say rustic, but it's not exact, and it's about tasting as you go along, and it's about not wasting and cooking with what you have and making what you have exciting because it's seasonal, because the produce inspire you to make something. And I think there is probably a Mediterranean, kind of philosophy to that in cooking produce that you're excited about and making one thing a feature and then expanding from there, I would say. So things that aren't about technique necessarily, but about generosity, and that maybe are tasty because you know the story behind it too and the context behind it. Yeah.
So if we define Mediterranean as excitement, I'm totally in it. But on the other side, I never thought myself as Mediterranean, although I was born and raised in Sicily, and I live in Sicily, which is right in the middle of the Mediterranean. And I don't think that, I mean, from a conceptual point of view, I don't think that this idea of a Mediterranean culture has never been forged by the people living there. It's something that it's a label or a concept or a stereotype or a dream that has been forged from the outside for people craving this idea of food that encompasses all of the above, the history, the moving of ingredients, the building up of cuisines, of different cuisines, the freshness of ingredients, the locality of the practices, the non-exactitude of recipes, all of this. And so Mediterranean for me is quite a foreign concept. If I would never speak to my friends, this is a Mediterranean dish, they would laugh at me very loudly, probably. From an historical point of view, I can completely consent with what has been said, because we have nothing or very little that was actually native to Sicily. So when American people or foreigners come to the school and ask me, is this traditional? I always ask, but tradition since when? 4th century, 8th century, yesterday? When does tradition start? That's another huge question. So we have to, I think, I cook with what I have, I cook with what I know, I cook with what I like, basically. There's no secret ingredient or formula, and I consider myself a cook, not a chef, which is another big world, another big way of defining things. I think we have to reflect and be aware that when we put labels on things, it's an act, it's a process, it's a philosophy, it's a way of thinking, and then there are the things that happen that are probably on another level, in another story, in another world. I don't know exactly.
Safe to say Fabrizia would not say she's on the Mediterranean diet.
Do you want to know about the Mediterranean diet?
As a follow-up to that, I would love to ask the panel, what drew you to the cuisine that you specialize in? Whether it's your cuisine of origin or one that isn't part of your heritage. George, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. Would love to start with you. What took you from New Zealand to Portugal?
It kind of got there by accident.
Oh, sorry, was that correct?
I didn't really plan on moving there at all. I'd only been there for 3 days on a holiday before I moved there. Kind of just went there to escape COVID, moved there from London. So, but my partner's dad's from Portugal. She's half Portuguese, so there's a lot of family there, so it was relatively easy. But what I really started to enjoy about the Portuguese food is Portugal historically has gone through some very, very hard times, and they had to get very creative with the very limited resources that they had. So a lot of the most famous dishes, and my favorite for sure, are essentially just zero waste through and through. There's a lot of, my favorite is called farinheira. It's like a pork sausage, which is old bread soaked in pork fat with confit garlic and then smoked. And it's just you put it into a fry pan, like a dry pan, and it just starts to render, and it kind of explodes in the pan, and you end up with this pork fat, crispy bread with garlic, and it's just they mix that with scrambled eggs, and it's just fuck, that's the one, And so there's so many Portuguese recipes based on having nothing, soaking old bread in stock and leaving it overnight, and then pan frying it a little bit like an omelette is a very famous migas. So I think learning a lot about these sort of dishes and how they use blood, and like they're very creative with their offal, and even down to the pastries, you know, like I think there's like 450 sweets from, like, all based on egg yolks. So there's like egg yolks, sugar, and then depending on which nunnery had the extra ingredient, that's where it kind of deviates. So there's like cinnamon, and, or like the wafers, like, you know, when you go to the Body of Christ wafers, I'm not sure what they're called, but there's bread, skinny bread. So I think it's just like, it's very interesting to see like what you can do when you have nothing, basically. I think that's really important, and I think we're kind of going through now, whilst the world doesn't have nothing, we're quite the opposite. We've got a lot, but I think being very like creative with what's around us, I think is very, very important, and like that's like basically what the Mediterranean diet is, in my opinion. And I think Portugal is a very good example of that. Whilst it's barely in the Mediterranean, you know, I think there's like a little slither down the bottom, which is technically the Mediterranean, but the idea is the same for sure.
New Zealand is maybe more Mediterranean than Portugal. What was the question?
What drew you to the cuisine that you specialize in?
But I do very simple Sicilian cuisine. I have a farm, so I grow what I cook with. Well, Sicilian cuisine is very rich. I mean, I don't know if any of you have been to Sicily. It's layered with a lot of history, and as many spices came from Persia, tomato and eggplants came from South America, and I mean, we have a lot of ingredients that have traveled and landed there and have been interpreted in their own way. And on top of this, there are different cuisines in terms of street food cuisine, aristocratic cuisine, very rich, somehow similar with Portuguese sweet toothness. And or you have poor cuisine, although what you so-called the cucina povera for me is a non-existent object, because poor people were just starving, so there was no cucina povera. They were eating water with stones, more or less. And but there is a huge rediscovery of the simplicity of wild greens, of bitter flavors, of simple food. This is the trend. This is what happens today. So I follow what my farm tells, what my family history tells me, what my surrounding and the people I work with tell me. It's a very open cuisine within the fact that I am in Sicily, so I would not serve avocado, ideally.
No Italian guacamole for you.
Well, no. I love it, but
Yeah. I would say the food I'm drawn to people, and then I'm drawn to the food they eat. So I'm led by wanting to connect with the people around me and then learn from them. So I've gone on like journeys of learning. So for example, I met an Auntie Zekia, who was convinced that she knew the best baklava recipe. So I spent time with her to find out like what her idea of, what were the key things that made the best baklava for her. And I remember sharing that, and then I got messages from other aunties who were like, I know a better baklava, and actually an easier one. So I was like, okay, auntie, I'm coming over. So it became this series of like aunties going, no, come to me. I've got other technique. And then I'd learn all these like names for them. So like Auntie Zekia taught me lazy wife baklava, which is a terrible name for what it is. One, it's not lazy at all. It's, and it's my favorite. But it says something, and then I would go off on a tangent of, well, where does this name come from? How did people come up with this name, and what was the scenario where this way of making baklava was formed, you know? And I think that comes from me, again, struggling as an immigrant to express myself or connect with elders who spoke a different language. So it was always, let's cook together. And it started with my dad. My dad used to have a kebab shop for 30 years. And before he had a kebab shop, he had a kebab van. So he'd have a truck, a food truck, and he'd travel around the UK and stop off in different places, unlicensed, and sell kebab. And so when I wasn't in school, he'd take me with him, and this would be like late night. And we'd, be back home at 3 a.m. And this was such an adventure to me. But what was really interesting to me is he wouldn't let me eat the kebab, and he wouldn't eat it himself. And he was like, no, this isn't good, right? He was like, this is what English people think a kebab, and this is what they eat. We don't eat this. And I was just like fascinated by this. I was like, what? Dad, it looks delicious. And then we would get food from the Chinese takeaway next door. And he was like, that's good. But then we'd go home, and then he'd say, we're gonna wait for what Mum's gonna make. Mama's gonna cook our food. And then, but at home, what we'd have was so much simpler. So Mum's homemade yogurt with a starter that she kept going for years, and boiled eggs and fresh spring onions, parsley, and then pita bread she'd made. And so just these simple things that for me were the most beautiful and delicious food, because I got to spend time with my dad. And so that just became an instinctive thing, leaning towards, this person says they have this fantastic recipe. And frankly, I have mastered the perfect baklava, I think, because I've spent time with all these masters and of their own kitchen. And so when I think about food from a region, I think ultra regionally, of literally the space one individual occupies and the story they have to how they got to where they are in Edmonton. So an auntie who's formed a bakery in her shed in Enfield in North London, she's from Pazarcık in the eastern part of Turkey, and she's managed to recreate what she thinks is the bread of her childhood. So no one makes bread like her. That's her bread. So I don't know if that answers anything, but that's, when I've been asked what is Kurdish food, I say it's whatever I make. Yeah.
I have the same auntie problem as you have. So Persian food is what I grew up with for the first 18 years of my life in that country. And then I immigrated to this country. And then I wasn't smart enough at the beginning to ask the questions, but after 2 or 3 years, it came to mind that I'm not smelling and I'm not tasting the same things that I tasted in the kitchens in our families when I was a kid. I think that was the starting point for me to become more serious. And I became more serious. I've delved into the history a lot more. History was my least favorite topic when I was elementary school. Now it's my most favorite topic. So the mission of connecting to the past and preserving culture is why I cook every day. And the problem I have is when I interview folks who live by the Caspian Sea and we talk about a dish called fesenjan, their version is very sour because they use the local wild pomegranates. And when I talk to the family of my own who lived in Tehran, the flavor is a little sweeter. And when I talk to people who live on the coast on Persian Gulf, it's very sweet. So I have that aunt problem by talking to people in different regions.
Your food,
Yes.
honestly. I wouldn't call it a problem. We have the same within Sicily, the little island of Sicily. I remember once I learned from my mother a recipe that was specific, a kind of pizza, specific from the town of Ragusa, which is south of Sicily. And I had a friend who was doing a video of me while doing this pizza called scaccia ragusana. And he posted it on YouTube. I never got insulted more than that time because I don't know how many hundreds of aunties came up and said, this is not at all the scaccia ragusana, the real scaccia ragusana. And so the kindest one that didn't insult me too much, I said, well, come and teach me the right, and we became good friends, and I learned from her scaccia ragusana, so it's...
Can I just say one more thing? Because it makes me think about my dad saying, you know, this is not our kebab, you can't eat this. This is, well, it is now, like, there's a version of kebab that's sold in London that's formed from interacting with a community there and what they've responded to, what they like. And I love a takeaway kebab, right? Jordan over there knows what I'm talking about. There's certain, you know, that in a certain context is delicious as well. I wouldn't tell Dad that, but you know, but so that has traveled in certain regions. And the reason I say this is because Jennifer told me about a pizza place nearby here that's actually it's Kurdish Turkish run. It's a Kurdish Turkish run pizza, Detroit pizza place. So it's like doubly insulting. Sorry.
That I can't do that.
I have to tell you that my wife and I had lunch there the other day. It is fantastic.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. We must go.
Where are you bringing me to now?
I'm In-N-Out. We're going for an In-N-Out burger.
So I'm doing my sacrifices.
Well, related to the kebab and the, you know, when you have a lack of wild pomegranates, how do you balance respect for tradition with the creative freedom to reinterpret or modernize what is considered classic? And I don't know, what value does authenticity have, do you think, in today's food world?
I can start with that. I mean, authenticity has become an annoying word, I'll be honest. Like, it's just used so much. And, you know, what does authentic mean? And I think, if anything, what we've realized, even in this beautiful, you know, conference and getting people together, food is meant to travel, it's meant to move, it's meant to respond to its environment and interact. It's a language, as I've said before, right? So I remember because I've asked myself that question too, in, you know, what food am I saying I make, and how respectful am I being? I think that's important. And I remember going to a talk, I think we spoke about this in our original when we all spoke, the British Library food season, and we had Dr. Jessica B. Harris come, if anyone knows Dr. Jessica B. Harris, incredible food historian focused on the history of black food in America. And someone in the audience asked her how, you know, and she said in such a heartfelt, sincere way, she asked, how do I stay true to the food of my region when I'm no longer there and I no longer have access to those ingredients? And I could have cried when I heard that, because I feel the same. I'm no longer where the place originally is that these recipes were from, so things taste different, right? So I think it's, but what you realize is what, Nadira was talking about, and is that it's meant to change. It's meant to interact with what you have. It's the ingredients here are different, and they take new life, and they might be more like delicious in a different way. And it's accepting that that's actually beautiful. It's exciting, but the way to do it is acknowledgement. So it's not authenticity. It's acknowledgement and respect. It's nodding, giving a nod to where something comes from. So not acting like you completely invented it yourself. You know, that's what
also,
I think.
authentic has a misleading undertext that it's always the same. It's not. But not even in its own region, in its own place, in the same house. You never do the same recipe. How much goes between the written recipe and your making of the recipe? There's a huge, when you read a recipe, it tells you half as much as what you really need to know in order to make that recipe. How strong does the fire need to be? How close you need to, how many times you need to stir, and all of this. So the recipe is extremely volatile, and as much as the ingredients, one year an apple is sour than the other, and so on. So I think there is authenticity should be meant in relation to your experience. You have to be connected to what you're doing. It has to make sense for you, and then the dish will make sense. It's not a matter of, you know, that was how it was done in the 18th century. The water is different, the flour is different, the weather is different. How can you possibly make something similar?
Somebody asked me about authenticity. One of my first questions is, how many years ago, how many decades ago, how many centuries ago are you talking about? And the second question is, where are you in the world? Because that tells me what ingredients you have access to. My favorite example is, you know, one of the most traditional, common dishes for Persian New Year involves fish that has been flavored traditionally with Seville oranges. Seville orange is not something you will find in local safeway in the United States. But I can tell you, if you mix this amount of orange juice and this amount of lime juice, you get something that's very close to juice of Seville orange. It's not authentic because I don't have Seville oranges. Does it taste authentic? Yes.
Yeah, I think I mean, food is based on creativity, right? Like everything was created at some stage, and I think if you're trying to be as authentic or as respectful, I think is maybe the best way to say it, is you're in the same mindset of someone 300 years ago in the Mediterranean. You've got what you've got surrounding you, and then you just get creative with that. You know, that's your creative limitation, and then within that, you can only make X amount of things, but it's authentic to that region. It's authentic to who you are and what you have and what you can do with it. And I think that's a very powerful thing.
No, not at all. Many Mediterranean cuisines practice zero waste and sustainability long before those were buzzwords. How does this approach affect your work and the way you cook? And maybe we can start with George, since I know that's a big part of your restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do, you know, like we're very, very careful in where we source everything from. Like everything is organic, and it's super expensive. Like even the deep fry oil is organic, and it's all like as close as possible. And it's just like where I just have the same mindset of just like ultimate respect, you know. I think there's a lot of restaurants have a lot of power in this world, you know, like the food scene has a lot of power in this world. We have a lot of spending power, and we have an audience almost every day. And I think it's, so we can change the world, the way that we use food in this world, just by how much money we spend, you know, because I think I'm going to go off on a little tangent. Every food purchase we do is a vote, you know, and if you're spending your money on regenerative agriculture or permaculture or going to the small farmers, like that's a vote in their direction. But if you're saving costs and you're going to these big guys, these big, you know, industrial agriculture, that's a vote in that direction. And I think it's very important now that we're kind of in this crunch time of like, you know, I live in this world of like quite heavy information about the state of the world and sort of the sustainability side of it and kind of the remedies, and a lot of the money that we're spending on food needs to be put into the small local producers, you know, these small farms, and it's kind of, you know, that's like, it's not that different from what it was for a very, very long time, you know, up until the Industrial Revolution, basically. Like, this is how food was grown, and that's what we need to go back to. And there's like scientific proof, like tenfold, and another big thing which has been like very, very obvious for me in the Mediterranean food, and especially in Portuguese food, is just like quintessentially zero waste, you know. And I think we're like, as we waste a lot of food. You know, like there's 40% of all food grown in the world is wasted, and that's actually, and that number is before it gets to your house. So there's also the food that's wasted at home is on top of that 40%. So there's an insane amount of waste. But then if you're like, you know, you're staying local and you've created these little boundaries, and you go back before the Industrial Revolution, before it was easy to ship bananas across the ocean, like you've got what you've got, you know. And I think that's the way that we work at the restaurant, and that's basically the Mediterranean way as well, you know. Yeah.
Maybe recipes or ingredients came from the East. We should also look at cooking techniques. So zero waste was very important to ancient Persians. For example, when it came to dairy, when the milk was produced and they made yogurt and cheese, there was still some liquid left. But they boiled it, and the solid material was drained and dried, and this can last forever, and all you have to do is rehydrate it and make a delicious dish. But there was still some liquid left after you did that. So if you boil that further, you would end up with a very dark substance, which might be the sourest element in the world, that I use it as a snack. But after this, there was no liquid left. So every drop of milk was turned into an effort at the University of California, Davis, to study how much of our farm material is not used. California is a major producer of pistachios. When you harvest pistachios, there's a soft hull. It's often thrown away. In ancient Persia, they made a jam from it. Nothing was left from a pistachio, including the hard shell. It was grounded and used as a mortar. So zero waste practices are Asian.
Bringing props. This is very exciting.
It's like magic. It's so delicious. There's a saying. There's a saying in Turkish kitchens that to not waste is to bring abundance into your kitchen. So it's a blessing not to waste. The word is bereket, which I think means, it's like a mix between like good fortune and blessing, to bring blessing. So to utilize everything. And I think it's about changing the way, the starting point to creating a dish. So it's not about starting from a recipe or what you might think you want to eat. What do you have? What do you utilize? And there's a restaurant in London called Silo, which is zero waste. Oh, really? Did you come up with the quote then that I'm going to say? Because I lived by that during the pandemic. Limitation breeds creativity.
Yeah, I lived by this. It wasn't me, but
it wasn't, yeah. And I think it's true. The most creative, the most delicious things come from creating limits, you know, having parameters. And I try to live by that. And the pandemic really changed my mindset as well. And I realized, you know, the world is like suffering in loads of different ways. And the only thing that gives me mental health-wise, like sanity and joy, is working in community. And there's a lot of anti-food waste work that's going on that I know about in London. And I've worked with the Felix Project. And what the Felix Project do is what you were talking about is the food waste before anything even arrives in your home. So a lot of supermarkets, once something passes a certain date, they've got to throw it away. And Felix Project collects all produce that would otherwise be thrown away because it doesn't look quite right, like because it's wonky or something, or needs to be thrown away. They collect and then redistribute to shelters and community centres. And what I do is I go and cook in those shelters and community centres. And it's the best time you can ever have. So you don't know what you're going to get that day. You get a donation, and then all the volunteers figure out what we're going to make that day together. And we make the most delicious food, and it's the most satisfying thing. And I think more restaurants could cook like that too, for sure.
Yes, I think that in the old days, this was the idea. You couldn't waste stuff. I mean, the world was, there were very few people who had wealth and could eat, and the majority didn't have food, so they would do anything and use everything. And I also committed the kitchen I work in is on a farm, so also farming brings you to a different level of awareness, because you have to use everything you grow. I mean, it's out of question that you throw it away if you have enough zucchini, because at the moment of zucchini, you have a lot of zucchini. And you have to be ingenious to figure out ways to use them and to store them and to put them somewhere. And so, of course, now this huge global issue of people starving on one side, of waste on the other side, of obesity on one side, of this whole mess around food. It's a larger topic. I feel we need another panel maybe next year. I don't know, honestly. I want to be a bit provocative. Honestly, if I feel political when I declare, like George, that no waste, no losing, and all of this. But I wonder, my simple act, how much it can go beyond being a model, a way to look at. On the other side, I would dream about having a good Monsanto, because we need masses of things for the people. We are a lot of people in the world. We can't think of solving the stuff, digging our potato in our backyard. I mean, this would be a little bit utopistic. So I think this is a much more complex discussion that needs to be addressed and complicated, but the world should wake up on this. Yeah.
I'm just going to say one thing. I think there are a lot of people on the planet, and there's a lot of economists saying that we need to grow more food, we need to have more food, we need to up our production by 100 to 120% to be able to feed 9 billion people. But the reality is that we already grow enough food for 10 billion people. So it's not that we don't have enough food, it's just that we have a distribution problem. And but it basically comes down to the model of the food world. It's for what it's designed to do is perfect, and that's to make money. If it was designed to feed people, then it's completely failing, because it doesn't. It just makes a lot of money. And so, going back to the way that I work in the restaurant and the way that historically everything was happening is just staying as local as possible, supporting the farmers who are actually doing the hard work and getting paid absolutely nothing. I think there's a lot that you can do by growing your own potatoes and making statements, and there's these low-key education things. And I was chatting to an amazing guy yesterday who's a chef at one of the universities in California, and his food budget last year was $23 million, and 15,000 meals a day. It's one university in one state in a massive country. Imagine how much money that is total, and putting that into the right farms and supporting the right people, and that's game changing. That's world saving. It doesn't happen overnight, of course. There's demands and of course there's pressures, but this is kind of what I was saying in the beginning. We have a lot of power as people in the food world. How the world is used, and supporting the people doing the small guys doing the hard work and getting no recognition, I think that's the direction we should be. It would be lovely to go in that direction. But yeah.
Fran, did you want to ask one more question? We have and then I have a question from the audience.
Great, sure. Kind of building on what we'd like to see in the food world, if you could see one ingredient, technique, food principle adopted more widely in the US and beyond, what would it be and why? Maybe we could start with you, Nader. I know in a future panel in this conference, you're going to be talking about ingredients like saffron and rosewater and dates being named as kind of key ingredients to watch. Curious to hear what you think about that.
I think my view is not what ingredient, not what ingredients we need more, but the question of, and also not more transportation, but what can we do to grow the food locally, those places that the food is not being grown locally. There is a fabulous project going on in Central Africa where the desert has expanded, nobody's farming. The big landowners, their land is not being used, but they are using their resources to feed their people by buying food from other countries. The project is helping the landowners to give up their land in return for making the land more productive so they can feed the people that he is paying money to feed. That type of model, I think, is what we need to do. So grow food locally, not necessarily what additional ingredients or better transportation.
See, we are a very agrarian island. I mean, Sicily's all farmed. Well, I'm talking about Sicily, not I don't know what ingredients you should add here.
It doesn't have to be ingredients, but
Maybe a bit less sauces. I find American food always covered by something.
That's so interesting you say.
wow, guilty.
That's so funny you say that, because I was just writing about my memories of when I first moved to the UK and my cousins, and we were invited to our first British roast dinner, and my cousin leaned over and went, "What's with all the sauces?" But I think what I would say I'd like to see is more community interaction both ways. So the community interacting more with their local food spaces and being more involved in kind of responsible for them surviving in a way and investing, and then the food spaces interacting with the community and being aware of what's grown around and how to support the community, how to employ locally. And I think I'd like to see that more. There was a really fantastic little project in East London to support a really historic market called Ridley Road Market, which is one of the most diverse working class communities in Hackney, Dalston, and this really working class immigrant market, Ridley Road Market, which was being under threat from gentrification and things. And what happened there is there was a temporary, it's a produce market, right? So not cooked food, but produce. And there was a temporary restaurant built. And to be able to eat in this restaurant, so they put up a menu of the day that was on the board. And if you wanted to book a space, you had to, there was a list of ingredients, and you had to go buy from the market some of the ingredients and take it, and that would book your space in the restaurant, and then you could eat there. And I thought that was really cool, because they're encouraging people to support the market, and the food is from the market and cooked there. It was just a great little idea that I thought was brilliant.
I think my one would be maybe just running a little bit stricter and on what seasonality is. I think there's eating tomatoes in January in Northern California, like, come on, you know, like, why is someone buying and selling tomatoes from Australia to serve? And, you know, like, I think if we stick to, like, you know, much stricter regulations on what's in season, and, you know, the food is not only tastier, but it hasn't come from halfway around the world. And you're probably realistically supporting local farmers and, you know, just staying true to where you are in time and place.
I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer for some audience questions.
So we have 2 audience questions. Super quick, Nader, what are the Persian names for the ingredients that you mentioned?
The little white ball that I show is called kashk. It's basically a fermented.
Microphone.
It's called kashk, and it's a fermented dairy product. And the second item I showed you, which was a very dark, almost blackish substance, that's called qarakurut. Talk to me afterwards. I'll
And then I think to end this wonderful discussion, we have a question about how we bridge the misconception of what Mediterranean cuisine is to the U.S. as compared, you know, to the regions and the cultures and the cuisines that you're talking about. Is there a way to sort of bridge this, you know, on our end? You know, I know we had a conversation when we were pulling the panel together about what Americans think Mediterranean food is, which often comes down to hummus. And how, you know, and so what are, you know, or, I mean, there's, you know, and we talked a little bit about this, these sort of coastal, yeah, like there are certain things, right? But how, so someone is asking, how do we bridge this misunderstanding?
Need to bridge anything. Everything is useful, also the misunderstanding. I mean, huge things have been built on the concept of Mediterranean diet, and it's not all bad. I think you need to be aware. You need to read books. You need to know the countries you travel to and be aware. And be aware that we have distances, we can get closer or more distant, and that everything plays a game in our experience. The misconcept, the bridge, the non-bridge, and we just need to know what is what. I don't think there's, I think everything is part of this life. I mean, we wouldn't be here speaking of a Mediterranean something if it wasn't for Ansel Keys and his little box of superfoods for Second World War soldiers, and the idea of the Americans not having heart attacks, and looking at southern Italians starving because nobody was eating and not having heart attacks because they were very slim. And so that's how Mediterranean diet came up, basically. If you know this, you put it in context and you use what it's useful.
I would say just be curious. Be curious, and again, it goes back to interact with people and ask questions and be willing to constantly learn. And yeah, and I don't think it's on anyone to like bridge anything. I mean, because it's constantly moving and it's constantly changing, so you can build as many bridges as you want. But I think it's a mindset. It's be willing to listen, be curious, and be aware. Yeah.
I think it's like you can imagine like America, the global giant, just taking like the best of each dish from each country, you know, and taking it back and like, this is what we're going to use, this is what we're going to sell, because these dishes are very sellable where we are. But I think it's going a little bit beyond that, you know, like stories sell, you know, like there's always, like the narrative sells dishes, the narrative tastes good, you know, like there's a lot of, I don't know, just like what you guys are saying, just diving a little bit deeper, understanding a little bit more, and then just going a little bit beyond what looks good on the menu, you know, like just going a little bit deeper and creating the narrative behind it.
Creating also your own narrative about things through your experience, not just relying on the big narrative that is around.
Interesting enough, I had a very similar conversation 2 nights ago. And this gentleman and I talked for about 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, we both agreed that if you don't start by talking to our youngsters, we may not be able to solve that problem. So reading and showing them the experience of what other food cultures taste and look like, starting from the young people, might be a solution.
Sorry. All right. Well, so thank you to Francis Kim, Fabrizia Lanza, Melek Erdal, to George McLeod, to Nader Mehravari. This was a wonderful conversation. I know it was a big, we sort of came in with a big overarching, maybe too big question, but I think it's, when we do Worlds of Flavor and we're focusing a theme that's on 22 plus countries, we have to poke some holes in it. You know, it's a useful organization, a useful theme in that way to organize as an umbrella. But thank you so much for your stories and for sharing your experience and for this conversation. So let's give them a hand. We are heading to our world marketplace. I am going to ask my colleague Kristen to grab Fabrizia. Fabrizia is going to sign her book. And then also Musa Dadravin will be signing his book, The Turkish Cookbook. And so our marketplace is sponsored by Catalonia, World Region of Gastronomy 2025, and Kikkoman Sales USA. Because of the rain, we're going to be all inside, so both levels. Try to taste as much as you can. We'll have entertainment from Aguilar Flamenco, a fiery fusion of rhythmic footwork, soulful guitar, and passionate vocals. And then all of today's programming concludes by 7:30. Tomorrow we'll be here bright and early, 8:15 with breakfast on the first floor, featuring select recipes from chef and cookbook author Rose Preveet, prepared by our culinary team. And then we'll start here in Ecolab with a business-focused conversation. So thank you for your attention and your energy. And here's Worlds of Flavor Day 1.
Welcome to Peanuts in the Plant Forward Kitchen. I'm Ashton Pelham, and today we're diving into how school meals can help kids grow up healthy and happy with a little help from peanuts. Now, joining me today are two experts in school nutrition. We have Chef Aaron Smith, who's whipping up a delicious peanut-based recipe, and Angela Gomez, a registered dietitian who knows how to make school meals both nutritious and kid-approved. Now, Angela, balancing USDA guidelines with what kids will actually eat, that is no small feat at all. How do peanuts help you strike that balance?
Well, as you know, peanuts are a familiar favorite, especially in the form of peanut butter for a lot of our students. And we want to feed kids something that they're excited about, which peanuts are part of that. Peanuts are really versatile. They can be included in culturally relevant school meals, in globally inspired dishes, sauces, baked in breads. They can be in so many different things. On top of that, they're also nutritionally jam-packed. They have about 7 grams of protein per serving, which is more than any other nut. They also have healthy fats, fiber, and over 30 essential vitamins and minerals, so nutrient-packed.
Now, that's a great point. Peanuts really check a lot of boxes when it comes to nutrition, and clearly there's more to them than just PB&J. Now, Chef Aaron, walk us through what you're going to be cooking us today. It smells amazing in here.
Yeah, so today we're gonna set up a peanut butter toast bar, right? It's a great way for kids to interact, a way for them to kind of build their own plate, as well as to touch on different global flavors as well. So today we're going to touch on 3 different types of peanut butter toast. We're going to do a spicy, we're going to do a fresh, and we're going to do a sweet one. So I'm going to start off with the sweet and spicy toast, which would include some orange marmalade, some sriracha, as well as cilantro.
Now, that sounds really delicious. Now, Angela, there are some schools out there, they're cautious about peanuts because of food allergies in particular. Is this as widespread as people think that it is?
Peanuts are one of the top 9 food allergens in the US, and all food allergies should be taken seriously. However, banning peanuts gives a false sense of security. So it's best in school cafeterias to plan and not ban. And the truth is, we're serving a lot of foods that could be potential allergens to some of our students. The way we manage those foods and keep those foods safe is the same thing we can do with peanuts. So training, proper food labeling, and proper food preparation.
It would be great to have peanuts back on the menu everywhere. I hate for kids to miss out on this great nutrition, and wow, how does that look? It looks so amazing.
Orange marmalade, some sriracha for a little bit of heat, and some cilantro.
Wow.
And then if you could help me out.
Yep. I'll grab this piece of toast right here. It's already got a spread on it.
So you can start with the banana split. Bananas, you have some chocolate chips and a little bit of caramel. And I'm gonna work on the one with the fresh berries.
Now, this is pretty easy.
I'm just gonna supervise you all, okay?
Now, Chef Aaron, how do you handle peanut allergies in your operation?
Well, we make sure we do a lot to make sure there's awareness about peanuts. The way we went about it, we first incorporated peanuts in the high school level, middle school, and then created a lot of signage for the elementary students. And with our signage, we make sure that we have pictures of what a peanut is versus just relying on the word peanuts. Less than 1% of our students has a peanut allergy, so we want to make sure that those students are super aware that we have peanuts, but also give the students who love peanuts the opportunity to have it. For me personally, my daughter has a peanut allergy, so I make sure that she is super aware, ask the questions, know what it looks like. But her friend still eats it. They still have the trail mixes. They still have the other things. And she would check. She said, I see a peanut.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so Chef Aaron, this looks beautiful right here. I see we have the sweet, we have the split, and then we have the spicy.
The cool thing about this, right, you can have as much fruit as you want. And I understand the USDA rules about added sugars, but a little drizzle doesn't hurt of honey. And another cool thing that we can do with this concept, we can make this a peanut butter grab-and-go box for like grabbing on the classroom, field trips, all the things for the banana split. You can have a little thing of bananas, chocolate chips, and the students can build their own. So you have a lot of flexibility with this concept.
Chef Aaron, Angela, thank you both. We learned that peanuts are not only packed with nutrition, but when prepared safely and creatively, they can be a powerful part of school meals, both breakfast and lunch included. Now, thanks for watching Peanuts in the Plant Forward Kitchen. I'm Ashton Pelham. See you next time. And seriously, where was this food when I was in school?
Right?
Lemongrass tofu is intensely flavorful, packed with fragrant and citrusy lemongrass and crispy golden tofu. This plant-based dish, called da wu sa in Vietnamese, is delicious served with rice, rice noodles, or in fresh spring rolls. The first step to making this dish is marinating the tofu. In a bowl, toss minced lemongrass, soy sauce, chilies, turmeric, which gives the tofu its yellow color, palm sugar, rice wine vinegar, and lime zest. Pour this over the cubes of Nasoya Organic Superfirm tofu and allow the tofu to marinate for 30 minutes, tossing occasionally. After the tofu is marinated, we're ready to cook. Heat 2 tablespoons of oil in a large nonstick frying pan over medium heat. Arrange the marinated tofu in a single layer and cook. Turning occasionally with chopsticks or a fish spatula until browned and caramelized on all sides. Avoid overcrowding the pan when browning tofu to ensure even cooking. Top the lemongrass tofu with peanuts, cilantro, sliced chilies, and some freshly shaved lemongrass. Serve the tofu with a side of jasmine rice. You will love this dish's perfect balance of sweet, spicy, and savory flavors. Enjoy!